Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the internet where your cesspool is my jacuzzi. My name is Lauren Neidigh. If you hear, you probably already know that. I'm going to have a couple people joining me today. One, I believe Bruce from Oregon is going to pop in, and then I'll have my dad join us at around 9:15, 9:30, because the case we're going to talk about involves now a competency hearing. My dad's a forensic psychologist. He works with patients and does assessments on patients in jail. I've actually sat in on a couple of them. So he can answer any questions anyone has about mental health and competency hearings and all that, and like what constitutes someone being incompetent to stand trial. Any questions regarding this case or any other case that you guys may be following? Um, yeah, feel free. Sound. Can you guys not hear me? Give me 1 second. All right. Tell me if you can hear me now. Hey, what's up?
Ladies and gentlemen,
Okay. Hey, how's it going? Okay, before we get started talking about the case and all that, just really quickly, and I'm not going to talk about this too much because I've met my quota for being emotional on a live stream for the rest of my life. Um, Jeff from Legal Vices passed away, as we found out today. Um, I'm not going to talk too much on that subject right now, not because I don't care, obviously, but because I don't want to like get sad. Um, so I obviously liked Jeff a lot. I would have considered him a friend. And I met Jeff when we were both on Megan Fox's stream. I think I want to say it was like over the summer or something, and that was my first encounter of Jeff. Was him falling asleep on Megan Fox's stream and snoring into the microphone. So, he was a funny guy, whether he was trying to be or not. So yeah. And then Bruce, I don't know if you want to say anything.
he was a great guy. I agree with Dave Neal. He was incredibly nice
Mhm.
while being incredibly strong at the same time. And I did, I usually just come hang out on your channel, so I didn't get to talk to him a lot, but
Yeah.
I did have the honor of driving fake big rigs
Oh, yeah, that's right.
in American Truck Simulator with him, which was
Yeah.
a great time. So I poured one out for Jeff.
Cheers.
Rest in peace. Cheers, Jeff.
Um, so, sorry, Amy just said I was thinking of that stream earlier. Yeah, I'll have to find it and clip it. So I will, talk more about that another time in like its own dedicated video. I'm just not gonna ramble on about it too much right now because it makes me sad, and also I'm sure it makes everyone else sad. So I'm gonna try to get a little distraction going here. Talking about this new case that happened a couple hours from me. This happened right before Thanksgiving. And it's pretty crazy. I know a lot of people did not see. I posted kind of a little background video before, but it's a really new case and it hasn't been like really picked up yet, I would say. But I do think it's gonna eventually bring about some national conversations about the death penalty, about criminal competency, about the insanity defense, everything like that. So, um, her name is Kelsey Glover. And I'm gonna play a little bit of this, not too much, just to give you the background part of it, and then we have some stuff we'll go over, and then I'll get my dad in here to answer questions. So give me 1 second. Tug was just saying that his family didn't know he did YouTube. Oh, yeah. And guys, if you're watching me but you haven't followed Jeff Legal Vices, even though he's passed, I know he really wanted to get to 100K subscribers. If you could go and sub to his channel, that'd be great. I think he deserves it.
Mhm.
All right, guys. Let's take a look at this so you all know what we're talking about here first. Give me 1 second. That's my face, and I'm watching my face. Yep.
Whoa.
Okay. Not that one. This one. All right. And this one is just sad. Can you hear that, Bruce?
Yes.
Okay. A woman in Osceola County, a few hours from where I live, was arrested a couple of weeks ago for some of the worst crimes imaginable. 35-year-old Kelsey Glover has now been indicted by a grand jury for first-degree murder of her own 14-year-old daughter. Child murderers deserve a special place in hell as it is, but Glover also allegedly deprived her daughter, Giselle Glover, a type 1 diabetic, of her insulin medication before the murder. This led Giselle to suffer greatly before she was killed. Even worse, Kelsey reportedly violently attacked her roommate when the roommate tried to stop her and save Giselle. We're going to look at the video of Kelsey's disturbing behavior during her perp walk and go over the court document that gives insight into what happened that day. The reason I wanted to talk about this case is because I think it will eventually bring about important conversations about the death penalty, as well as the differences between mental illness, antisocial behavior, and criminal incompetence. Today, I'm going to go over what I've gathered about this case so far. This motion for pretrial detention outlines some of what happened.
You're muted, Lauren.
Yeah, I know. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, rather than watch me go over it, we're just going to go over the document here. Let's see, where did I put that? Here it is. Okay, let me zoom in a little bit so everybody can see it. All right. So it's not a very long document, guys. It's only 3 pages. So let's take a look at this. It's going to outline what happened from the perspective of her roommate, which I believe is the victim in this case, because she, in addition to murder charges, she also has charges for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. So here's what happened per the roommate. And this is terrifying, guys. Okay. On November 20th, 2024, the defendant was arrested pursuant to an arrest warrant for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and battery. The victim of those charges is, and then it's redacted, but I'm pretty sure that's the roommate. As detailed in the arrest warrant, the victim and the defendant reside together with the defendant's 2 children. The victim assists the defendant in caring for the children. When the victim was attempting to assist with the defendant's daughter, Giselle, the defendant became violent towards the victim and struck her several times. The defendant then armed herself with a hammer and made threats to kill the victim. So she's, killing her kid. The roommate comes in and tries to stop her and tries to help the kid. And then Kelsey Glover picks up a hammer and is threatening to kill her. And she beat her a little bit. And then she was like, I'm going to kill you. She was beating holes in the walls from what I've seen. It's crazy. In detailed supplemental reports, law enforcement obtained a sworn statement from the victim. The victim indicated that the defendant took her minor daughter, Giselle, off her insulin medication. Giselle became ill and was vomiting, not eating, and feeling weak. The victim was arguing with the defendant about Giselle needing medical assistance. Defendant refused to give Giselle her medication or take her for medical treatment. Giselle was having difficulty consuming water due to it making her ill. So she took Giselle apparently off the insulin and medication on the 18th of November. So it was a little while before the actual murder happened. So it's like she tortured her own kid for days before this murder happened, which is terrible. So I don't know if you guys, a lot of people probably do because diabetes is a common illness, but if you are on diabetes and you don't have your medicine, you might go into something called diabetic ketoacidosis, and that can cause you to not be able to keep anything down, basically. So this girl was thirsty as hell. She was really needing hydration, and her mother is refusing to give her medication, and she's throwing up every time she tries to get any sort of sustenance. So it's really terrible. Really terrible. Hey Jim, what's up? Okay, let's keep going. The victim was able to remove Giselle from the water and began CPR. So Kelsey had put Giselle in the bathtub, and she grabbed her daughter's hair and held her head under the water. The roommate comes in, tries to get Giselle out of the water, and she starts doing CPR to revive her. Kelsey then attempted to prevent the victim's efforts and push the victim out of the bathroom. So she stops the roommate and she pushes her out of the room. The victim contacted law enforcement, and the defendant armed herself with a hammer and began to threaten the victim. Law enforcement observed several holes in the door that were consistent with the hammer striking the door. Giselle was transported to the hospital and was pronounced deceased. So it's bad enough that she did what she did, with the insulin, and then there's the heinous murder, and then there's the stopping her from being revived. So you have to really, really want someone dead to do all that. That is just terrible. Hold on. Osceola County Sheriff's Office is awaiting the findings of the autopsy, but reasonably expect to add the charge of first-degree murder. And she has been indicted on first-degree murder charges now. This document is a few weeks old. All right. Okay. And then this was about pretrial detention. So there's not a whole lot more information out there, but we do have a little bit more. And we're going to look at the perp walk too, because the perp walk is disturbing as hell. Um, there's a little bit more information here about the competency hearing. So um, Kelsey's attorneys have said that Kelsey's unable to appreciate the charges against her, potential penalties. She doesn't understand the legal process, and she doesn't give facts regarding the case or understand facts regarding the case. So now there's a competency hearing. In okay, it's January 29th. Got it. So her attorneys say that somebody evaluated her, a psychologist evaluated her, and I want to say it was November. Um, and that psychologist or psychiatrist said that she's not competent to stand trial. So what happens now is I think I don't know actually if the other side gets to have someone evaluate her as well. I think so, but I'm not positive. Uh,
Yeah, this seems like a long delay um,
yeah.
from when all this happened. So
So this happened
presumably they're going through what they have to do.
one, two, hang on. Before. So this happened about 4 weeks ago. Um, and so now we're waiting on, the competency hearing to happen, and this will all progress forward slowly from there because we know these things can take time. Now,
Yeah.
especially if she is found incompetent to stand trial, then they have to restore her to competency before she can stand trial. So
Mm.
it could be a while depending on the results of that hearing. But let's see her. Give me one second.
I
Let's
mean,
see her.
is that the only option, or is there like what if this person is like um, permanently incompetent?
I mean, it just depends. If she's like really severely mentally ill, she would go to a state hospital, like a
Mhm,
longer term institution. So
mhm,
that's like you don't see that very often here, because most people who have to go to the state hospital, what would happen then is, and this happens a lot at my job when I work at the hospital.
mhm.
They send people to the hospital from the jail wherever they are. And we have to evaluate them. And then, if they're not competent, they're going to end up sitting up on our unit, which is meant to be a crisis unit for people to stay like 3 to 5 days. Um, but these
Okay.
people sometimes they're waiting for months and months for a bed at the state hospital. So
Yeah.
she could end up, at a local hospital just waiting for a bed to open up in the state facility. Um, I'm not really sure how that's going to go yet, but we'll see. Probably not locally. I mean, it's going to happen in Orlando, so she'll be at a hospital around Osceola County um, until she can get to the state hospital. If that's the case, if she's really like not competent, if she's really mentally ill and she can't like understand what's going on.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, oh yeah, I undermeant what you just said. She would stay at a state hospital. That's what happened to Richard Deere in Colorado. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Oh, good night, Sarah. All right. So let's take a look at this perp walk because this is one of the craziest things I've seen. Um, just look at her demeanor and what she's doing. And we're gonna watch this first one. Is no sound because the news outlet you can't have her language on their show.
Oh boy.
So we'll see. Purple Dragon Shield, thank you for the 20. Have you heard of the Roditas in Canada? A couple charged and convicted of unaliving their son as they refuse to medicate his diabetes. Oh yeah, send me a message. I've never read about that. Okay. Um 1 second. So let's look at this one first. And the links, guys, to these perp walk videos are in the description of this video. I'm gonna skip around a little bit. But let's see. Where did that go? Here we are. So this one does not have sound on it. So she's just like smiling, hanging out. Like she's fine with this, laughing. It's really crazy. All right. You'll see her again here. And this woman behind her with a camera, we're going to see her point of view in a minute, and hers will have sound. So she's like very unbothered by all of this. Like she thinks everybody else is crazy. But this is on Law and Crime, so if you want to see the rest of it, definitely go to the link in the description there, and I will take a look at this one. Okay.
What happened?
All right.
What happened this morning in Point Siena? What happened this morning? What happened this morning?
Anything you want to say right now?
Anything you want to say about what you're being accused of? Lying and committing.
So I don't know if you guys heard that, but obviously some obscenity going on there. All right, now let me see if I can find. There's a portion where she's walking in the hallway and you can hear her dropping some F-bombs. Hang on. There we go.
How are you feeling right now? Are you innocent? Are you innocent?
Fuck you. What the hell? Like, that's so deranged, man. You guys should have been able to hear the sound on that one, but on the first one, you wouldn't have heard the sound. So, Oh, hello, Larry.
Hello, Lauren.
Hi. I asked my dad to join from his office computer so that he wouldn't be in his pajamas for this. I was unclear as to whether or not that would have happened. But Dad, can you tell people what you do for a second?
I'm a psychologist. I work primarily in forensics, where I'm interfacing with the court.
Okay. Have you heard about this lady?
Which one?
The one we were just talking about. I don't know if you were watching it all. I told him when to join, so I didn't tell him to watch.
No, I didn't.
This lady drowned her kid in a bathtub after withholding her insulin, and now she has a competency hearing coming up, and I'm wondering if you could explain to people what that entails, a competency evaluation, and what happens from there.
All right. Well, a competency evaluation should not be confused with mental illness. You don't have to be, you can be mentally ill and still be competent. Competence in terms of evaluation is a very functional criteria, is just based upon the person's capacity, number one, to understand the charges against them, number two, to understand the possible penalties they're facing, number three, they have to demonstrate that they have an understanding of the principles of the court. Concepts like a plea bargain, no contest, those kinds of pleas. They have to demonstrate their capacity or demonstrate they don't have the capacity to rationally consult with their attorney. Then their next criteria is typically, can they manifest appropriate courtroom behavior? And finally, are they capable of testifying relevantly? So someone could be severely mentally ill, but if they meet those criteria, then they would still be competent to proceed. So mental illness and competency are somewhat separate. Typically, the competency issue, if someone is functionally incompetent, you then have to say what mental illness they have that's making them that way. But the first part of it is just determining whether or not they meet those particular criteria.
Okay. How often would you say, like, you're seeing, when you do these evaluations, how often would you say that somebody is found like actually incompetent versus they're competent?
Well, you got to put this in the context of the system. I mean, when I go down to the jail, I'm seeing a lot of people who are very invested in trying to convince me that they're incompetent, even though they aren't. So the percentage of people who actually would be found incompetent is probably much smaller than you would think. Maybe 25, 30%, but that's because so many people we see are clearly faking, and they're just trying to pretend that they don't understand.
How can you tell when someone's faking it?
Well, it's pretty easy, actually. There's a couple different things. Number one, when people are faking, they typically will make a presentation that's unrealistic, meaning that people who are psychotic, there are certain symptoms they don't have. They don't smell things. They don't feel things touching all over their body. So when somebody starts reporting those kinds of symptoms, you know that they're pretty much making it up. The real obvious ones will pretend they can't remember what you said one sentence ago. But if you get somebody who's more sophisticated, that's where psychological testing comes in. You have tests which are a couple different things. You have tests which are mental health tests, but they always have validity scales built into them so that they detect if somebody's faking bad. And then you have tests which are very specifically designed for malingering. I mean, that's why you give it to them. For example, the structured inventory of malingered symptomatology is like 60 items, and probably 50 of those items are not true mental health symptoms. They're really bizarre kinds of things. So somebody who's faking bad, unless they're very sophisticated, they're going to endorse, you know, my hallucinations are always in black and white, or there's one where you'll ask them if they get nervous and their leg shakes under the table, but all you're going to do is look at their leg and see whether it's really shaking when they answer the question. You know, so there's testing which is really designed to get fake bad people and determine that they're not really incompetent. They're not really mentally ill, even for the most part.
Give me 1 second. Cat Lady Ballerina, thank you for the $5. To be fair, I also say F you when someone asks me a question. Yeah, okay. Also, tell your dad I wear my jammies to work. He can too. This isn't work.
If I'd known, I would have.
Oh, please don't do that. Karen Carson,
I'll
thank
allow
you for the $5. Of course you will. Of course, thank you for the $5. I would love to know what your dad thought of the business lady from Wisconsin and her attempt at no competency. I don't know of that. What is that, Karen?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh.
No. Okay. Can you think of any high-profile cases, Dad, where you like saw somebody and you're like, yeah, that guy's not, someone on the news or something where they're like, that guy or that lady is not competent or she's not going to?
Well, of course, I couldn't say any names.
No, I'm talking about like just like random people on national news or something like that, like where you get the impression like.
Well, I've seen serial murderers who pretend they're incompetent, but they're not. They tell me how they hung the curtain and chopped the body up and buried it, but then they say they didn't know that was a crime. Their brother told them to do it. Nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
But
brother told them to do it?
Yeah. In the particular case I was talking about.
Oh, okay. Let me see. Somebody here had a question. 1 second. Oh, Sheep says, thank you, Larry.
You're welcome.
Somebody's asking about Letitia Stotch. I don't know who that is either.
No.
Behind the Times. Yeah.
Don't know that case.
Yeah.
There was an interesting one I saw on the news this morning in Portland. So there was a DJ. I don't know if it was a strip club or something or a bar, but a DJ was stabbed by an employee who had worked there like 10 years ago or something.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know why she was even there, but and it's all on security camera.
Uh-huh.
So she just sort of walks in and is hanging out by the DJ booth, and then she just pulls out a knife and starts stabbing him. There's literally no reason.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that case. And that's here in Portland.
Yeah, well, there are two different issues here. One is incompetent to proceed, which means you simply can't go to trial because of your intellectual or mental illness. The issue of whether somebody's not guilty by reason of insanity is much more complicated and much more different criteria. So, for example, the lady you're talking about, it looks crazy, but the reality is when someone examines her, if they can say if she understood the nature and consequences of her actions is the term, then she would not be not guilty by reason of insanity. She would have to not really understand what she was doing.
have you ever had to at your practice write like an involuntary hospitalization certificate, a Baker Act, anything like that?
Oh, sure. We have
Can
to do
you
that.
can you explain to people when that happens and when you would not do that versus when you would do that?
Well, I mean, the criteria here in Florida is whether or not the person's in imminent danger to themselves or others. So obviously, you would only write the certificate and call the police to take them if, in your clinical judgment, they were either suicidal or homicidal. Um, Honestly, most of the time, you would assess their suicidality, meaning, have they ever made attempts before? There's a whole bunch of criteria that would suggest higher or lower risk. Have they ever made attempts before? Do they have a plan? Have they given stuff away? Are they isolated? So when you see somebody who's saying, yeah, I think about suicide every day, uh, but they're thinking that they just would prefer not to wake up, or some accident could happen and they wouldn't mind. That's no reason for a Baker Act. I mean, typically, you would get those people with a therapist. I have patients, or have had patients, where they're kind of in the middle, really know whether they need to go to the hospital. In cases like that, we will sometimes call the family, and one guy I still have his pistol. It's been 25 years. So I made him give me his gun, and I called his wife and told her, so we didn't Baker Act him. So it's based upon the criteria. You just got to make a judgment call of whether or not someone's truly an imminent risk, or whether they're just depressed and thinking that they don't want to live, but they're not actively planning to go home and shoot themselves.
Okay, here's this is about the guy who shot the United Healthcare exec. Somebody says, can you be mentally insane enough to target an insurance exec with malice, and be mentally incompetent?
Yeah, very unlikely. The criteria, that's what I was saying a while ago. The criteria for not guilty by reason of insanity is very narrow. It is really simply, does the person understand the nature and consequences of their actions? Certainly, this guy understood the nature and consequences of his actions. I mean, he's demonstrated that. So, I would be shocked if someone found him insane. Now, could he be incompetent to proceed? He could be. From what I've seen of him talking, it seems doubtful. But I have no idea whether he meets all those criteria or not. But in terms of insanity, it's so narrow. It's rarely, insanity defenses are rarely successful, and a very small percentage of cases, even when the person, we're back to that malingering thing. You go to jail, they want to be found in not guilty by reason of insanity. You're going to get this incredulous presentation where it's pretty clear that they're faking.
Not guilty by reason of insanity. If somebody is actually not guilty by reason of insanity, is that how this happens? They don't understand the moment from a psychotic break, but they are competent to stand trial. So, like, at the time of the offense, they didn't really understand what was happening. Is that when somebody would then try to plead insanity or whatever?
Yeah, that's a possible scenario, and certainly a realistic scenario. Someone can be not guilty by reason of insanity in the sense that they were so psychotic that they did not really understand what they were doing, but still, at the time of the competency examination, meet all the competency criteria. They know the charges. They know what the court principles do. Yeah, they could be competent, but still have a not guilty by reason of insanity defense. I mean, in fact, they couldn't go forward in court with the not guilty by reason of insanity defense if they weren't competent to proceed at that time.
Okay, this is segueing into a different case. Obviously, the one that I went to Arizona and streamed the trial for. My dad probably has a limited knowledge of all this stuff, but my parents have seen some of my streams. So, what are Larry's thoughts on Laura making up stories to retaliate against both romantic and non-romantic victims? What does he think she gets out of it emotionally? So this woman does not appear delusional at all. She says stuff like I'm pregnant with twins, or she says stuff like I don't know, like the studio gave me crap audio. But then there's evidence that she like withheld certain information or doctored documents, so she seems to know what she's doing and understand. So if she's not delusional, then what is the point of making up stories? I guess this person is asking, what does she get out of it?
Well, I would love to answer that, but I'd have the board of psychology in me in the morning. So, I can't give any opinions about a specific person that I've never examined or never seen. There's certainly any number of possible motives, but I couldn't speculate.
Karen Karsten, thank you for the $5. I know he can't really answer, but Dad, blink twice if you think Laura Owens is delusional and a faker. Oh my god. Yeah. Okay. What else we got here? There's like people asking about specific cases that I have never heard of. Who's Lori Valo? Bruce, do you know who that is? Lori Valo? Oh, Bruce, you're muted.
Oh, geez, I did it. I've heard the name, but I'm not familiar with the case.
Yeah, same. I don't know who that is. Yeah. Okay. Dad, can you tell us a weird story about like something that's happened while you were working? I don't know, in the jail or something like that.
Well, let's see. One of my early cases, this was a really early case. I go in the interview room. Here's the door, and here's a chair, and here's a chair. And I went in and sat down by the wall with him between me and the door. And about 10 minutes into it, he stood up and said, "You're Satan." And he started tearing up the room. And
oh, no.
Oh, yeah. I was lucky to get out. Security was pretty close by, but I was lucky. So no one's ever sat between me and the door since then. So that kind of odd stuff happens. But probably my favorite case is the one I was telling you about a while ago with the serial murderer who wanted to defend himself, and his stories about how his brother convinced him to cover for him by disposing of the bodies, but his brother was the real killer. Yeah, that one was interesting.
Cynic and Chief, thank you for the $2. Larry's opinion on his daughter being a celebrity. Not a celebrity.
Oh, but, yes, you are a celebrity. That's great.
Yikes. My dad took me to the jail to take notes one time when I was helping him with work, and some guy helicopter dicked at me on the way out.
Yeah.
So that was a story.
Oh, my.
Yeah. The showers are just like open right in front of this big window. So he's just like 360 helicopter dick right at me. So that was fun. It's probably the first time he saw a girl in a while, but sad for him.
And I guess if you don't have anything better to do, that's the thing to do.
Yeah. For them to do.
Jeez.
Lori Valo, she's about to go on trial in Arizona for killing her husband, and she's going to trial for attempted murder for her. What the fuck? Okay, I don't know who that is.
We might have to look that one up.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna have to do that.
There's a lot of cases. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's going back to not guilty by reason of insanity. That's really, really hard to use that defense.
Have you ever seen that happen and used successfully?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've seen it happen before. I probably not a lot, but, probably over the course of my career, 10 or 15 cases have been successful in using that. And there are often people who, before I say this, I mean, if your psychosis is drug-induced so that you don't understand the nature and consequences of your actions,
right,
that would not be an insanity defense. So you really have to be looking at someone who has psychosis. Typically, they stop taking their meds. They have a psychotic break. They end up doing something. Somebody puts them in jail, puts them back on meds, and they're competent by the time I see them. So your real issue is, determining, sorting out whether or not they were truly psychotic at that time. And that's not that hard because their crimes don't make any sense. I mean, if somebody's going after their sister, mother, father, That's probably not guilty by reason of insanity. When you see GI, it's a pretty random kind of violence or some pretty random event because they truly don't understand what they're doing. So,
well, this lady has a competency hearing next month. She drowned her daughter, and the roommate came in and took the daughter out of the bathtub and tried to revive her. So then she attacked the roommate with a hammer and said she was going to kill her. So she couldn't revive her. So they have, I guess, a hearing on January 29th or something.
Yeah.
So,
that's
I think to me,
what's that?
Withholding the insulin for 2 days was that means this is not some sort of random.
No, she's charged with first degree murder, so premeditated. I think. Yeah. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Hang on, let me see before we go. What about people using their official diagnosis to try getting easier sentences on serious crimes? I'm autistic and shouldn't get any leniency. It frustrates me when people use disabilities as shields.
Well, you're back to a couple different angles here. One is you have to really determine if they're exaggerating, faking, malingering. But setting that aside for a moment, there's a different term than not guilty by reason of insanity. It's called diminished capacity. And what that means is that the person, understood the nature and consequences of their actions, but because of their mental illness, they really had impaired self-control. They really couldn't think clearly at the time. Probably the best example is bipolar disorder. People who are in severe manic state will go out and do really crazy things, but they, they know it was wrong. They understand the consequences, and you can tell because they fled the scene. But truly, somebody who's in the height of a manic episode doesn't have much judgment, doesn't have much self-control. So the term in court would be diminished capacity. So the guy's attorney would not argue that he's not guilty by reason of insanity, but rather that the court should be lenient because of his diminished capacity.
Interesting.
So there are cases where that's legitimate. Of course, there are a lot of guys who are doing that, just to try to get an easier sentence.
Yeah. Do you think autism is a valid reason for extenuating circumstances leniency?
I wouldn't think so. What I mentioned was bipolar, where there's a radical change in somebody's day-to-day functioning.
Yeah.
Something like autism, there's not going to be these ups and downs or radical changes. Hypothetically, I suppose it's possible that someone with autism would not understand social norms to the extent that they could get in trouble for some kind of crime in that way. And in that case, it might be diminished capacity.
But they would still probably need some sort of official medical diagnosis, or?
Oh, yeah. If you're going to use diminished capacity, it's based upon the medical diagnosis. And back to the same thing we talked about, at least in this state, intoxication, drugs, and alcohol do not qualify for the diminished capacity.
Cat Lady Ballerina, thank you for the $5. I once went to evaluate someone at the jail, and the guy had saved the styrofoam containers. His meals came in and made himself a little outfit with them.
That's great. So I would really have a question whether or not he's malingering.
Well,
he may not have been, but that's the kind of bizarre stuff that people malingering will do. Right.
It's like my last Halloween costume.
Yeah.
Your last Halloween costume. He should have built a little hut, like an igloo or something.
Yeah.
With this.
Wow.
So he's probably crazy. All right. Traveling Teresa, how can you spot malingering? So without testing, Dad, how can you spot malingering? What's a tell?
But pretty much by like what we were just talking about, making, and I'm not saying this guy was malingering. I don't know. I've obviously never seen him. But that's the kind of stuff that people who are malingering will do. They'll do something that's very bizarre that really is not representative of a symptom of a mental illness. Now, I mean, that guy could be blatantly psychotic. I don't know, but that's the kind of thing you're looking for if you're not using testing. They'll give you bizarre stories. They'll tell you about bizarre symptoms, which are not mental health symptoms, but they'll make them up.
Mm.
One of the guys told me how his friend's right there beside us in the room, and he's with him 24/7, and so on and so forth. And he's been there since childhood, and he just never told anybody before because he was embarrassed.
Wow.
That's bizarre and strange, and certainly is not representative of symptoms of a mental illness. That's just a crazy story.
Oh,
Somebody
they
says
might
Go
they
ahead.
might write too many Medium articles.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Somebody says self-diagnosed autism doesn't cut it. Dad, I have a question. If you have somebody who comes in and tells you they have schizophrenia, but they're not psychotic, do you take their word for it? What happens then?
No, I wouldn't take their word for it. We
Okay.
would have to do a full evaluation, and certainly, if they're not showing any symptoms, we have to do medical records.
Well, that's why people bounce from ER to ER sometimes because you give them a diagnosis. They're busy. They're not going to go back and check. They're not going to do testing, obviously.
Right.
There's a big difference also between, well, maybe you could describe this better. What's the difference between what you do and what a psychiatrist does?
Probably the difference. Psychiatrists are pretty much medical doctors. They're prescribing medications. They're treating the illness just medically with medications, which is valuable. I don't want to be misinterpreted. The difference in what psychologists do and psychiatrists do is that we rely upon testing and statistically based evidence to make decisions, where psychiatrists, the ones who do forensics, will have a 15-30-minute interview with the guy, and then they'll just base that upon their opinion of what was said without looking at any kind of statistically based objective data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, people walk into the mental hospital, especially people who go voluntary, and they expect a psychiatrist to do this whole big thing and act as like a therapist almost, and then they get mad when they're like, "This guy saw me for 20 minutes, then I got kicked out the next day." I'm like, "Well, it's a crisis unit. Most psych units around here, especially, are crisis units. It's not like you come in when you're in crisis, they stabilize you, and you leave. It's not like they're not going to do a thorough evaluation to figure out what shade of personality disorder you have. It's most people don't think of it that way because they don't see it on a regular basis. But
I wanted to mention one of your messages up there was about self-diagnosed autism.
Yeah, that was
no,
Right.
definitely a self-diagnosis doesn't cut it.
Ooh, that's an interesting topic. So in the medical profession, how do you differentiate between a true medical diagnosis and self-reporting from the person? So if I go to the ER and I just say, yeah, I've got XYZ,
Right.
how do they differentiate that, or how do you long-term differentiate that from an actual doctor making a diagnosis?
In an ER, they're most likely going to take your word for it.
mm-hmm.
In a diagnostic setting, a forensic diagnostic setting, I'm going to ask them about the symptoms of their illness, when it started. Again, I'm looking to see if they're really giving me information that fits the diagnosis or if they're making things up. And then, of course, we rely upon testing and medical records. I mean, that's really, if you're, sometimes it's really obvious, but if it's not, if you're 50-50, you got to see somebody's medical records to really be able to figure that out. And the autism thing, why I was mentioning that, I see this a lot where people come into my office and they think they have autism. And so that's part of the evaluation. And autism, that differential is sometimes hard to make because people who are socially anxious, socially withdrawn, people who don't communicate well, there are lots of people who will say they have the symptoms that you see on the internet when you look it up. But the difference is that autism is not something you get in midlife. This is a disorder that's, starts in childhood, it's lifelong. The severity of it doesn't come and go. So there's a lot of things. A lot of people do have social problems in terms of communications and interactions, but that in and of itself is not autism. That's one symptom of autism. So lots of people are doing that self-diagnosis based upon the kinds of things they read on the internet. And that's kind of dangerous for them, I think, because they're going to get themselves labeled with something they don't really have.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doomed in the next week every time I go to WebMD. So
Well, people who come into the hospital and say they're autistic or they have schizophrenia or something like that, sometimes they get medicine that they shouldn't have. So it's a bigger problem, I feel like, in an ER setting where nobody's going to rule that out. They're just going to be like, here, take an antipsychotic.
Yeah, that's what I was saying a while ago. In the ER, they're probably going to take your word for it and medicate you accordingly to what you say. And if that's not accurate, that can be really harmful.
Mm-hmm. Well, the person's usually withdrawing from something and they're not actually schizophrenic. They're like, I'm schizophrenic because they want to detox for a couple days on a psych unit. And so that's how that happens. Let me see. There was another one here. Oh, not that one. Oh, what about those cases where people get naked and try to eat people's faces off? That's called a bath salt.
I was getting ready to say, we're most likely talking about drugs. We're probably not talking about mental illness.
Yeah, and this was years ago, Dad. I don't know if you remember. I came home with a black eye once. Because somebody on bath salts had come and beat my face in on the unit. So that was fun.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That kind of really bizarre stuff is usually drug induced.
Yeah. Karen Carson, thank you for the $5. Lauren and Bruce are my invisible friends right here next to me. Okay, so you're crazy. Okay. Thank you for the $5.
We exist.
K-Dubs, thank you for the $5. Can you speak to parents in denial about the child having a severe mental illness until something goes wrong?
Yeah, that happens frequently. They don't want to accept that their child is mentally ill or that they have some problem. Oddly enough, many of them will know their kid has a problem, but they don't want to put them on medication because they think it's a stigma. It's really sad when that happens because it ends up going until the child gets in trouble or kills himself or something of that nature. And then, of course, they're full of regret after that. But it's not unusual to see that situation.
Lauren, do you think that plays into this Florida case we're talking about with the denial of the insulin?
I mean, I feel like what they're describing is like if the mother had denied that the child had diabetes or something or had a mental illness, and so that she didn't want to give medication. In this case, she withheld the medication knowing of the child's illness, and it was just sinister. It wasn't really... Not really the same thing, but I mean, kind of the verbiage there is a little bit similar. Let's see. Oh, yeah, everybody's saying bath salts. Bath salts. Bath salts. Oh, man.
Oh, my gosh. I don't even know what that is. That's like a bad...
Yeah.
What is that? That's like...
It's like...
Super PCP or something? What is
you ever heard of Flocka?
No.
Okay. How do I explain this? It's like a mixture of things. Bath salts. Let's look up exactly what's in that. Bath salts. Bath salts, drugs. What's in it? Okay. Okay, so it's similar to...
Oh, to get my hands on Lauren's search history.
Okay. Well, I mean, which computer? Okay, so synthetic cathinones are central nervous stimulants, and they are designed to mimic the effects of cocaine, methamphetamine, and MDMA. So, yeah.
Wow, that's a hell of a combo.
Well, you see the violence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
God, what did I just see? Hang on. There was a case in Texas where a 14-year-old beat his mom to death supposedly out of nowhere. Well, that is just insane.
Yeah, and I think people, they see these stories in the news, and the human brain wants to find a solution to everything or wants to find the root cause. And when you, like this Florida case or the case I just described with the DJ getting stabbed, we don't know what's going on yet. Maybe we will, maybe we won't, but we don't do well not knowing the answer.
Yeah.
I've found.
Yeah.
Special KL says, I could listen to your dad all day. I don't know how to feel about that. Oh, God. Okay, let's see. Bath salts used to be legal. Well, that's uncomfortable.
Scary.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, question here. This is not the question that this person asked. They said something about Laura Owens. But how can you tell the difference between personality disorders? Like, if someone was histrionic versus someone who's just, like, a little dramatic, what's the difference?
Well, it's the degree and the pervasiveness of personality disorder is, again, something that usually has an onset in late teens, early adulthood, and then it persists without intervention. So someone who who people might call histrionic is somebody who's highly excitable, and maybe they exaggerate things and they kind of jump from thing to thing. But someone with a histrionic personality disorder would do that to the degree that it actually impairs their functioning. It impairs their ability to have relationships. It impairs their ability to keep a job. So it's a matter of severity. And the thing with personality disorders I don't know if you've heard DSM-5, that is kind of the diagnostic statistical manual for psychologists, psychiatrists. But while this is the second time they've had this debate while they're revising it, and that is that personality disorders should be on a continuum rather than as discrete entities, because 9 times, I rarely give a single personality disorder. I typically almost always say unspecified personality disorder with borderline, histrionic, and something traits, because they really have characteristics and traits from more than one. And that's where the debate comes in the profession in terms of the diagnostic criteria, because there are a lot of people who believe you shouldn't have a lot of different names for them. You should really be diagnosing based upon the characteristics and the severity of the characteristics.
Yeah, so it's less about a binary determination and more about outcomes or tagging.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not histrionic, but I guess histrionic too. Histrionic, borderline personality, and autism spectrum disorder are like the most prominent TikTok diagnoses there are right now. Everybody thinks they have them. They watch a couple 15-second videos and they're like, "Oh, that's totally me."
Yep.
So that's one of the ones that annoys me a little more. So like people are so indulged in social media and they hear that kind of stuff that they like think they know how to use those terms. So like I was like upset about something, and this was a long time ago, and I was tweeting about it, and I get this random lady in my DMs who is like, so first she says a lot of nice things about me, and then she's like, "Well, you seem histrionic right now." I'm like, "No, being upset for a day does not make someone have histrionic personality disorder."
Right.
And then she was like, "Why did she block me?" I don't know.
Oh my.
When I was teaching my old joke, I used to say to my class, what does borderline personality mean? And they would hem on around, and I would say, it means your therapist doesn't like you. Because it's what they're calling you.
Somebody says, when does the DSM-6 come out? I don't even know the answer to that question.
I don't know. They've already done a 5R, which means they revised the 5. I don't know. I'm trying to think. Every 15 years, maybe 10, 15 years in between editions usually. Yeah.
Did Dad watch any of Sarah Boone's mess? Do you know who the suitcase killer lady is?
Vaguely. I've heard very little about it.
Oh, Bruce and I read a letter she wrote to the judge after her sentencing. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, we've seen quite a bit of it.
It's a lot. She's nutty.
But yeah, Lauren, when they send you the DM and they send you all this nice stuff and then they hit you, and then they end it like all the best. That's called a compliment sandwich.
Oh, I say God's got you negging.
Where there's like good stuff at the start and good stuff at the end, and then they insult you in the middle.
Right.
Dave turned me on to that.
Not a good pickup.
He gets those a lot.
A question on autism spectrum disorder versus Asperger's and autism. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, in the current DSM, there is no distinction between Asperger's and autism spectrum disorder. They did away with the label Asperger's because it's just a matter of severity. It's not a different thing. Asperger's was meant to define people who had the characteristics, but it was very, very mild. And now you would just say autism spectrum disorder mild or autism spectrum disorder moderate. So they've actually done away with that term Asperger's, but it really just refers to a very mild borderline kind of autism spectrum.
Did they remove narcissistic personality disorder? That's still there.
Yeah, it's still there. Yep.
That's another TikTok diagnosis.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's mother's a narcissist if you're on TikTok.
Yes.
Oh boy.
Here's the thing, we haven't talked about it, but I used to teach at college. And when I taught psychopathology classes, the very first, second, third, 10th, and 20th thing I said to them is, if there is no personal distress or no dysfunction, there is no mental illness. So it doesn't matter, when somebody says you're narcissistic or you're this, that, because everybody's throwing that label around. But the truth is, if it isn't a source of distress for the person and it isn't interfering in their life in any meaningful way, it's not a mental illness.
I see. You have to look at the outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, is addiction hurting you or impeding your ability to do what you want to do?
Right. That's right. It's a functional criteria. So every diagnosis, if you look through DSM-5, every diagnosis has that little sentence of personal distress or impairment. If you don't have personal distress or impairment, it doesn't matter what symptoms you have. It's not a mental illness.
Can you let Butter in?
I think your dog has some personal distress.
Can you let Butter in?
He's probably barking at the door.
Yeah, but I want to talk to him.
Are you getting DoorDash some milk and Red Bull, or what's going on?
Butter.
He's too old for that.
Come in here. Come in here. Come.
Butter.
Come. Come here. Come here. Come.
Butter. Oh my gosh.
Oh, he wants the whiskey.
Hey, Butter.
I see what's going on.
Hello. That's my dog. He's at my parents' house, though.
Yes.
Nice.
Somebody wants to know, do you think the internet / social media has any correlation with a rise in ADD, ADHD, autism diagnoses?
I think that it maybe not in a causative way, but certainly I have 6 million people coming to my office every week saying they have ADHD now because they read about it and they decide they have that. So we're kind of back to the impairment criteria. If you're forgetful and you're losing things, but it's not really a source of any distress or impairment. It's not really ADHD. Mm-hmm. I think that it's probably it's a real epidemic. I mean, seriously, I probably at this point, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I'd see 1 or 2 ADHD patients a month, maybe. Now I see at least 3, if not 4 every day, because everybody's coming in to get it diagnosed.
Yeah.
And these are legitimate diagnoses?
Not always. Here's the problem. This gets very complicated and certainly frustrating for me and people like me. Here's the thing. ADHD has basically 3 criteria. It has to have an onset typically before 12. You got to have the symptoms and you can't have any other mental illness. So here's what's happening. Social media, internet, everybody goes and reads all the symptoms, memorizes them, and then they come in and they sound like a book spewing it out.
Right.
It's really hard to sort that out. I mean, typically you'll use testing and try to get an observer who might be a little more objective to give you some information, but it's bad. I think that people are overdiagnosed, over-medicated, and that's because part of that reason is because when they come in to see psychologists and physicians, they've already memorized the symptoms and they want the Adderall and they're going to tell you what you need to hear for them to get it. So there are times that I'll have to say somebody meets the criteria, but I'm really not sure that they were being truthful.
K-Dubs, thank you for the $5. Is Adderall really just legal meth?
It's in the same class, but it's not quite as strong as meth. It's a little different. But yeah, it's a stimulant medication.
I mean, I took it this morning and I don't feel very meth out, so I think it's okay. I mean, I don't know. I haven't tried meth, so maybe I just don't know. Okay, I'm gonna end this here, guys, because I got some stuff I want to do before bed. But I'm gonna send you guys over to my friend the expert. Please tell him Lauren sent you and send lots of hearts and bacon emojis in his chat for me. I'd appreciate that. Thank you guys. I'll be back here tomorrow night. Dad, don't go anywhere. I'll talk to you guys soon. Don't forget to send the expert. the
Tell
bacon.
expert to shop smart, shop brew smart
Yeah, say that, I guess. Bye.
if you want.